All right, today we're going to talk about section 1.8, just the first part of it, which is dealing with square roots. Our essential question is, how can I find the square root of a number? So before we even try that, I think we need to define a couple of things. All right, the very first thing is square root. I define it as a number who has two equal factors. The next thing I want to define is something called a radical sign. You're used to calling it a square root sign. It looks like this. It's really a radical sign. It indicates a square root. And then the last term I want to define is perfect square. The perfect square is squares of integers. And I'll explain what that means. All right. So what's going to happen is you're going to be given an example like this. I'll say, all right. They'll have a radical sign and they'll put a number inside of it, 64. So we're asking what number multiplied by itself equals 64? Well, hopefully you know that answer is 8, because 8 times 8 equals 64. So the square root of 64 is 8. It looks like that sometimes. Sometimes it looks like this. I'll give you 144. What number multiplied by itself equals 144? Well, hopefully you know that 12 times 12 equals 144. But we define square root as a number who has two equal factors. 12 times 12 equals 144. But negative 12 times negative 12 equals 144. Square roots have two answers, a positive and a negative. This one has nothing in front, so we're only worried about the positive answer. This has both of them in front, so we want both of them written. They may ask you for just the negative. Okay, what number multiplied by itself equals 25? 5 or negative 5, because a negative times a negative is a positive. They are only wanting the negative answer though, so we just put negative 5. So whatever's indicated out in front of that radical sign, that's how they want you to answer it. If they give you a radical sign with a negative inside of it, you can't do that. There is no number multiplied by itself equals negative 16, because 4 times 4 equals positive 16, and negative 4 times negative 4 equals positive 16. It has to be the same factor. So you have to say no solution here. You can't say, well, 4 and negative 4 multiplied together. Well, yeah, no joke, but that's not following the definition of a square root. If you're given a fraction, your answer should stay as a fraction. So let's say they want the negative square root of 9 over 16. So we know we want our answer to be negative. That's all they're worrying about. Negative's out in front, not inside. So I'm going to ask myself, okay, what's the square root of 9? That's 3, so that's my numerator. What's the square root of 16? Oh, okay, that's 4. That's the denominator. So negative 3 over 4. If they give you a decimal, say like the positive or negative answer or square root of 1.21, then we want the answer as a decimal. I don't know this one off the top of my head. So we're going to use our calculator. To use our calculator, these are the buttons that we push. We are going to hit the second button first. Second. Then we're going to hit this x squared because we see the square root or radical sign behind it. So now that brings it up. So second, x squared. We will then type in our number. Our number is 1.21. I'm not worried about plus or minus. We'll just put that as part of our answer. 1.21. I always close the parentheses that it has. It doesn't really matter if you do that though. And then you hit equal. So I hit equal. It gives me the answer. Plus or minus 1.1. These are key steps to know. So make sure you practice that. The last thing I want to talk about are perfect squares. And we define that as squares of integers. So think of an integer, any integer, I don't know, 5 or -7. Those are integers, and squares of integers is we're taking that integer and taking it to the second power, and that gives us perfect squares. So numbers like 4, that's a perfect square because 2 times 2, or -2 times -2 equals 4. 9, 16, 3 times 3, 4 times 4. 25, 36, 49, 64, 81, 100, 121, 144. Those are all ones I should know already. Don't forget 1. Those are all ones that you should know. That goes 1 through 12 squared, or -1 through -12 squared. But then you should be able to go through 15. 169 is 13 squared. 196 is 14 squared. 225 is 15 squared. Anything after that that you know, that's gravy. These 15 you should know. The last thing that you'll be asked to do is you'll be given an equation. Example G. My equation here is x squared equals 25. So they're asking, okay, what numbers multiplied by itself equals 25? Like all equations, we need to get x by itself, and it's not right now because it has an exponent. So I have to do the inverse of squaring a number. And the inverse of squaring is square rooting. And what I do to one side, I do to the other. When I square root that, those cancel out and I'm left with x. The square root of 25, since I physically put the square root sign in myself, I need both positive and negative answers. So I need 5 and -5. Now, if it's a word problem where a negative answer wouldn't make any sense, then you obviously wouldn't put that because it just didn't make any sense. All right, that's all our information on square roots.